Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and deciding you just need to update your address on your voter registration.
Right, just a totally routine administrative chore.
Exactly. I mean, you bring your Aadhaar card, maybe a utility bill,
Yeah.
the standard documents that prove you actually exist and live where you say you live.
Yeah, the basics.
But when you get to the office, the official pushes your documents back across the desk and essentially says, well, this proves you're here today, but to stay on this list, you need to prove your grandparents were legally registered voters in this exact state, like 2 decades ago.
Wow. Which immediately shifts the whole paradigm, right? From a simple update to, well, a profound existential audit.
It really does. You aren't just proving your current residence anymore. You are being tasked with proving your generational legitimacy,
Yeah, and if you can't find those 20-year-old documents.
which, let's be honest, could have been lost in a flood.
Mhm.
Or maybe your family migrated for work.
Exactly. If you can't find them, you don't just fail an update. You get erased from the democratic process entirely.
Erased. Welcome to the Daily Deep Dive, the 3D initiative of UPSC with Saurabh Kaushik. I mean, we are looking at a huge stack of briefings today from May 28, 2026.
And that scenario you just described, it is definitely not a hypothetical.
No, it's not. It is the absolute reality of the Special Intensive Revision, or SARR, which the Supreme Court has just constitutionally validated.
Yeah, it's a massive shift.
Today, our mission is to decode 7 major developments. We are talking constitutional law, governance, climate, sports, global geopolitics.
We're covering a lot of ground today.
We really are. We want to extract the facts, understand the why, and master the key terms for your UPSC prep or, just your general curiosity.
And as a reminder to you listening, the best way to absorb this isn't just memorizing. It's about seeing the connective tissue.
Right, the connections.
Yeah, how a Supreme Court ruling on elections actually shares a thematic thread with, say, global semiconductor supply chains. The thread connecting all these developments today is this aggressive reassertion of boundaries.
Boundaries. I like that framing.
We are watching the state, the climate, and global capital aggressively redraw the lines of what is permissible, what's funded, and frankly, what is physically possible.
So let's get right into the mechanics of this first boundary. The Supreme Court judgment delivered by Chief Justice Surya Kant's bench.
Right, regarding the Election Commission of India.
Yeah, the ECI has this massive undertaking called the Special Intensive Revision. And normally, electoral roll updates are fairly mundane, right?
Usually, yeah. They add 18-year-olds, remove people who have passed away.
But the SIR, which started with a pilot in Bihar back in June 2025, was fundamentally different. I mean, it was so aggressive.
Radically different. The stated objective here was the purification of the rolls.
Purification, that's a strong word.
It is. And the ECI deployed this massive door-to-door verification infrastructure to do it. The sheer scale of the resulting data is really what triggered the legal earthquake.
Let's talk about that scale. Because in the Bihar pilot alone, the draft revised rolls resulted in the deletion of, roughly 6.5 million names?
Yes. 65 lakh people removed. Just in the pilot.
That is staggering. And then they expanded this nationwide, right? With a qualifying date of January 1st, 2026.
Exactly. And the criteria for remaining on the roll became the central constitutional battleground.
Because the criteria required a historical anchor. If your name wasn't already sitting perfectly in the 2002 or 2003 electoral rolls, you got fragged.
You did. And then you had to produce documentary evidence showing a direct ancestral linkage.
Just someone who was on those specific historical rolls.
Right. And the legal pushback to that was immediate and fierce.
Oh, absolutely. Led by the Association for Democratic Reforms, the ADR,
Yeah.
along with state-level political heavyweights, like the DMK and the TMC.
The petitioner's argument essentially rested on this concept of jurisdictional overreach.
Okay, unpack that for us. Jurisdictional overreach.
Well, they argued that by demanding ancestral lineage, the Election Commission was functionally conducting a citizenship verification drive.
Which is effectively a backdoor National Register of Citizens, an NRC.
Exactly. And constitutionally, the power to determine citizenship, to manage immigration, that rests exclusively with the central government.
Specifically the Ministry of Home Affairs, right?
Right. The ECI's mandate under the Representation of the People Act of 1950, which is a key UPSC term to remember, is to manage elections. It is not to police national borders.
And the petitioners had historical precedent on their side, too. They leaned heavily on the 1995 Lal Babu Hussain case.
Yes, a very important case.
That ruling established a really elegant legal safeguard, I think. the presumption of eligibility.
Exactly. It essentially said that if the state has already put your name on the voter roll, the burden is on the state to prove you shouldn't be there.
Right. You shouldn't have to continuously prove your right to exist in the system. But the SIR flips that completely on its head.
It really does. It tells the citizen, we presume you are ineligible until you prove your ancestry.
Which is a massive shift.
Yeah.
Add to that the TMC's claims in West Bengal, they argued this mechanism was being weaponized against specific demographics.
Specifically, Bengali-speaking Muslim voters.
Yeah. And it created such a constitutional crisis that the Supreme Court even had to order local police to protect ECI officials.
It was a highly volatile environment on the ground, but, the Election Commission's counterargument was anchored in a very uncompromising interpretation of its own duties.
Uncompromising is right. They argue that a voter roll filled with non-citizens fundamentally corrupts the democratic process.
Right, and they made a very specific point about identification. They argued that Ahar cards, ration cards, even standard voter ID cards, they aren't enough.
Wait, a voter ID card isn't enough to prove you're a voter?
According to the ECI, no. They argued those are merely proofs of residence or identity. They are not conclusive proofs of citizenship.
Oh, wow.
Therefore, a deeper, historically anchored verification was the only way to ensure absolute purity of the rolls.
And the Supreme Court completely validated the ECI's stance. They ruled in favor of the Election Commission across the board.
They did.
But I want to dig into how they actually justified this, because, if the Representation of the People Act doesn't explicitly give the ECI the power to run a citizenship audit, where does that legal authority even come from?
It comes from a very expansive reading of Article 324 of the Constitution.
Article 324, another crucial one for our listeners to note down.
Absolutely. Article 324 vests the superintendent's direction and control of elections in the Election Commission.
Okay.
Chief Justice Suryakant's bench interpreted this not as a narrow administrative duty, but as a plenary power.
Plenary, meaning absolute.
Exactly. In constitutional law, plenary means absolute and unqualified within its specific domain.
Yeah.
The court ruled that maintaining the absolute accuracy of the rolls is a non-negotiable constitutional responsibility.
So therefore, the ECI has the inherent authority to deploy mechanisms like the SR.
Right. Even if that mechanism blurs the line into immigration enforcement.
That feels like a massive institutional pivot. I mean, the court explicitly stated that the ECI can examine citizenship issues during this verification.
It is a monumental pivot. Now, the court did attempt to build in some appellate safeguards.
Like what?
They mandated that the verification mechanisms must remain reasonable. If your name gets flagged and deleted, you have the right to file claims and objections.
Before the Electoral Registration Officer, the ERO, right?
Correct. And if the ERO denies you, you can escalate it to the High Court. The Supreme Court also forced the ECI to report back with detailed demographic data on the deletions.
To ensure some level of oversight.
Yeah. But you are entirely correct about the institutional blurring.
Especially when you zoom out and look at the broader policy environment here. Literally a day before this judgment, the government announced the High-Level Committee on Demographic Change.
Yes. The timing is very interesting.
When you pair a demographic committee with a Supreme Court ruling that allows the electoral apparatus to actively filter for non-citizens,
you are looking at a highly synchronized multi-agency architecture.
Exactly. Designed to tackle illegal immigration from the ground up.
It validates the use of administrative databases as active enforcement tools.
Yeah.
And this concept, the state aggressively upgrading its institutional machinery to enforce compliance and clawback control, it's not isolated to just the Election Commission.
No, it's not. Which brings us perfectly to our second topic, the Enforcement Directorate.
Right.
Just as the ECI is undergoing this massive verification drive, the ED is getting an unprecedented injection of manpower.
A huge injection. On May 27, the Finance Ministry approved a 60.5% workforce expansion for the ED.
60.5%. We are talking about the first major cadre restructuring in 15 years.
Taking their total posts from 2,029 up to 3,256.
Over 1,000 new personnel.
No.
And if you look at where those people are being allocated, it tells a very specific story, doesn't it?
It really does. It shows how the government views the future of financial enforcement. They aren't changing the top leadership.
Right. The director and special directors stay the same.
Exactly. Instead, they are massively reinforcing the infantry, so to speak, and the legal scaffolding.
They're adding hundreds of assistant directors and enforcement officers to the executive wing.
But critically, they're exponentially expanding the legal and prosecution wings, taking additional directors of prosecution from just 1 to 7.
Wow. 7 times the capacity at that level.
And doubling the assistant legal advisors.
But why the sudden urgency? I mean, I understand the economy is growing and financial crimes get way more complex, but a 60% boost in one go, that is massive.
Well, it's a response to an exponential curve in their caseload.
Let's hear the numbers.
Between 2014 and 2022, the ED registered over 3,550 cases under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, the PMLA.
Okay, and before that?
In the 7 years prior to that, they registered barely 1,200.
So nearly a 3x acceleration.
Exactly. The sheer volume of PMLA cases, combined with their duties under FEMA, the Foreign Exchange Management Act, and the Fugitive Economic Offenders Act of 2018, it essentially overwhelmed their existing capacity.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here, because if you look at the historical data, the ED's conviction rate under the PMLA is notoriously low.
Yes, it is heavily criticized for that. It hovers around 25 to 30%.
Right. So from an outside perspective, if you have a machine that only successfully convicts maybe 3 out of 10 people, does throwing 1,000 more operators at that machine actually fix the fundamental bottleneck?
That's the exact question.
Or does it just mean we are going to see a massive increase in property attachments without any actual legal closure?
That is the exact critique leveled by many legal observers. But the government's policy rationale approaches this from 2 distinct angles.
Okay, what's the first angle?
First, they argue that the historically low conviction rate is a direct symptom of being understaffed.
Ah, I see. So it's a resource problem.
Right. Financial crimes involve tracing incredibly complex webs of shell companies, international wire transfers, encrypted ledgers.
They're not a simple smash and grab.
Exactly. You need specialized prosecutors to dismantle those webs in a courtroom. So by heavily reinforcing the legal cadre, the intent is to physically push more cases through the special courts to final conviction.
Okay, that makes logical sense. And the second angle?
The second angle represents a profound philosophical shift in how the state measures success.
How so?
Convictions and jail time are obviously important, but modern enforcement doctrine increasingly views asset recovery as the truest measure of enforcement success.
Hitting them in the wallet.
Precisely. Just look at the 2026 fiscal year alone. The ED attached over 1.6 lakh crore rupees in assets.
1.6 lakh crore. That is an astronomical sum of money.
It is. And physically managing that much attached property, we're talking real estate, frozen bank accounts, luxury vehicles, corporate shares.
All spread across the entire geographic expanse of India.
Right. It requires a massive logistical footprint. The expansion is designed to facilitate faster identification and attachment of these assets.
Which effectively paralyzes the financial operations of the accused before a conviction is even secured.
Exactly.
And that leads us to the unique and, frankly, highly controversial legal framework that allows the ED to operate this way.
Yes, the PMLA itself.
Because the PMLA gives the ED powers that regular police forces can only dream of. The core of this is the concept of proceeds of crime.
Right.
If the ED believes that your apartment was bought with money derived from criminal activity, they can attach it. And once they do, the foundational premise of criminal justice is totally inverted.
You are referring to the reverse burden of proof.
Yes. Explain that for our listeners because it's crucial.
In a standard criminal trial, the presumption of innocence is paramount. The state must definitively prove you are guilty.
Innocent until proven guilty.
Exactly. But under the stringent provisions of the PMLA, once the ED attaches your assets and establishes a foundational case that they are proceeds of crime, the burden shifts entirely onto you, the accused.
Wow.
You must proactively prove to the court that the money used was legitimate and untainted. The state presumes the asset is dirty until you prove it is clean.
Which gives the investigating agency an immense amount of leverage.
Yeah.
And we know that the Supreme Court upheld all of this, right?
Yes, they did. In the landmark October 2022 Vijay Madanlal Chaudhary judgment,
Right.
the Supreme Court validated the entire architecture of the PMLA. They upheld the reverse burden of proof. They upheld the exceptionally strict twin conditions for bail, which make it incredibly difficult to get out of jail during trial.
And the power to provisionally attach property.
Yes. The court's rationale was that money laundering is a distinct, continuing offense that actively destabilizes the national economy.
So it requires exceptionally stringent deterrence.
Precisely.
But, with that level of immense legally sanctioned power and now a fundamentally larger workforce, The political controversy surrounding the ED is completely unavoidable.
Absolutely unavoidable.
If you look at the opposition landscape of the Congress, the TMC, the AAP, they consistently accuse the central government of weaponizing the ED.
They do. They point to the timing of raids.
Yeah, arguing that the explosive growth in PMLA cases correlates way too neatly with election cycles and political realignments.
And critics point out a structural vulnerability in India's system, the lack of an independent, insulated prosecutorial service.
Right, because the ED operates under the Department of Revenue within the Ministry of Finance.
Exactly. So, while expanding the legal cadre might improve efficiency, critics argue that without an independent buffer between the executive branch and the investigating agency, the potential for selective enforcement remains structurally intact.
And we actually have a real-time, high-profile example of this playing out right in the briefs for today.
We do.
Literally on the exact same days this Contra expansion was approved, May 27 and 28, the ED was conducting raids at the residence of the former Chief Minister of Kerala, Pinarayi Vijayan.
Yes, regarding the CMRL Exalogic case.
Right, investigating alleged kickbacks routed through an IT firm. Now, purely looking at the mechanics here, regardless of the eventual judicial outcome of this specific case, and again, we're just reporting what's in the sources impartially, it is a visceral demonstration of the ED deploying its PMLA powers at the absolute highest levels of regional politics.
Absolutely. And as the ED scales up, the frequency of these high-profile interventions will inevitably rise.
They have the manpower for it now.
They do. The entire ecosystem of adjudication, which is the quasi-judicial process where an independent authority decides whether to confirm or revoke the ED's provisional attachment before the trial even concludes, is going to be flooded with new cases.
The state is dramatically increasing its capacity to audit and seize.
It is.
So we have the state tightening the borders of democracy with the SIRAR and tightening the noose on illicit capital with the ED. But what happens when the state decides to completely restructure how it distributes its own capital to the most vulnerable? That is where we see perhaps the most consequential shift of all. We are looking at the death of MG and Regie.
We are. On July 1st, 2026, the Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission Gramin Act of 2025 comes into force.
That is a mouthful.
It is. For the sake of sanity, we will just refer to it as the VBG-Ramji Act.
Perfect. VBG-Ramji.
And it officially repeals and replaces the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act of 2005.
MG and Regie wasn't just a law, though. I mean, it was a defining pillar of the global welfare state.
It really was studied globally.
The idea that literally any rural household could demand 100 days of minimum wage manual labor from the government, and the government was legally bound to provide it, that was revolutionary.
It was the ultimate safety net.
And now, the entire economic philosophy underpinning it is being completely rewritten.
Huh.
Let's break down the mechanics of VBG-Ramji because, on the surface, it almost looks like an upgrade.
It does. The new law actually guarantees 125 days of work per household, up from 100.
Right. An additional 25 days of guaranteed income.
Yeah.
That sounds like a massive expansion of welfare.
On paper, yes. But you have to look beneath that headline number at the actual structural engine of the scheme.
Okay, let's look under the hood.
MG and Regie was a demand-driven model. The mechanism was incredibly simple. If a drought hit or the agricultural sector collapsed and suddenly 5 million people demanded work, the center had to open its checkbook and fund that work.
Meaning the financial liability was theoretically infinite.
Exactly. It acted as an automatic macroeconomic stabilizer.
It's like an all-you-can-eat buffet, where the host has legally promised to pay the whole tab, no matter how many people show up.
That's a great analogy. And VBG-Ramji kills that demand-driven model completely.
It shifts to what they call a supply-driven model.
Precisely.
Ah.
Under the new act, the central government institutes a normative allocation.
Normative allocation. Okay, how does that work?
They look at a state and say, based on our metrics, we are allocating a budget for X million person days of labor for this fiscal year.
Okay, so they cap it.
Right. It is a prefixed menu. If a sudden crisis creates a surge in demand that exceeds that normative allocation, the center's liability is capped. Any excess demand must be entirely absorbed and funded by the state government.
Wow. That is a staggering transfer of financial risk onto the states.
It is massive.
And it's not just the excess demand, is it? The fundamental funding formula for the core allocation has changed too.
Oh, yes. Under MG and Regie, the center footed 100% of the bill for the unskilled wages.
And under VBG-Ramji,
We are looking at a 60.4 yield split.
60.4. So the center pays 60%.
And the state governments are now legally obligated to provide 40% of the wage funds directly from their own treasuries.
Are there any exceptions to that?
There are. Northeastern and Himalayan states get a 90-point Nalo split, but for the massive populous states in the Hindi heartland, they suddenly have to find billions of rupees in their budgets.
That is wild. And there's an unemployment penalty too, right?
Yes. If a state cannot provide work within 15 days of a citizen demanding it, the state government is now solely responsible for paying the unemployment allowance.
Okay, you can see exactly why the political opposition is absolutely furious about this. I mean, forget the symbolic anger of dropping Mahatma Gandhi's name from the act. The fiscal reality is terrifying for poorer states.
It is a massive burden.
A state like Bihar or Uttar Pradesh relies heavily on rural employment schemes precisely because their internal revenues are lower.
Right.
Forcing a 60.40 co-funding model onto them is essentially an unfunded mandate. They're arguing that this destroys the entire concept of cooperative federalism.
That is the core of the political pushback, yes.
Because a guarantee of 125 days means absolutely nothing if the state government goes bankrupt on day 50 and just stops offering work because they can't meet their 40% share.
The critics argue it turns a universal right into a conditional luxury based purely on state-level fiscal health.
But the center obviously has a rationale for pushing this through, and according to the sources, it's rooted in the concept of moral hazard.
Yes, moral hazard and long-term capital formation.
Explain the moral hazard argument for us. Why did the center feel they had to force the states to pay?
Well, under the 100% central funding model, state governments had literally zero skin in the game.
Right, it was just free money from Delhi.
Exactly. From the center's perspective, this created a perverse incentive. States were utilizing central funds to, say, dig trenches that just washed away in the next monsoon.
Just to distribute the daily wages.
Exactly, without actually creating any durable, productive assets for the country. By forcing states to co-fund 40%, the center believes it will force local administrations to be hyper-vigilant about the quality and utility of the work being done.
Because their own money is finally on the line.
Right.
Hence, the restriction on the type of work allowed under the new act. Because under MG and REGA, you could basically, move dirt from point A to point B.
Pretty much. But the new act restricts labor to 4 specific verticals.
Which are?
Water security, core rural infrastructure, livelihood infrastructure, and crucially, special works to mitigate extreme weather events.
Extreme weather mitigation. That is a fascinating pivot.
It's a shift from pure poverty alleviation through wage distribution towards state-mandated infrastructure development.
Frankly, there's a harsh macroeconomic reality driving the center's calculus here, too.
Oh, absolutely. The global economic environment right now, inflationary pressures from ongoing global conflicts, the massive burden of fertilizer and food subsidies.
The center simply cannot sustain an open-ended, infinite fiscal liability anymore.
No, they can't. Capping their exposure with a 60.40 split and normative allocations aligns perfectly with their broader fiscal consolidation strategy. The Viksit Bharat at 2047 narrative relies on this kind of fiscal discipline.
It's fascinating. The center is demanding a return on its investment in the form of durable infrastructure, specifically targeting extreme weather. And, that pivot is not just some theoretical policy choice cooked up in an air-conditioned room in Delhi.
No, it is a desperate necessity.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because while politicians debate these funding formulas, the reality of that extreme weather is actively cooking parts of the country alive.
Yes.
We need to look at what is happening in Banda right now.
The statistics coming out of the Bundelkhand region are genuinely harrowing.
They are terrifying. Let's lay out the data.
In the third week of May 2026, Banda district in Uttar Pradesh recorded a maximum temperature of 48.2 degrees Celsius for 3 consecutive days.
48.2 degrees Celsius. That is nearly 119 degrees Fahrenheit. It made Banda the hottest recorded place in the entire country, surpassing even the deep desert cities of Rajasthan.
Yes.
And you really have to understand the context here. I mean, the 30-year historical average for May in Banda sits around 42 or 43 degrees, which is hot, yes. But a spike to 48.2, that isn't just a hot day.
No, it is a massive 5 to 6 degree thermal anomaly.
It pushes the human body right to the absolute edge of physiological failure. So we have to ask, why is Banda, specifically, turning into a localized furnace?
To understand this, we really have to look at how global atmospheric phenomena interact with localized ecological destruction.
Okay, let's start with the macro factor.
The macro factor is the Lu. This is a notorious, intensely hot and dry westerly wind. It originates in the arid regions of Pakistan and Rajasthan, and it sweeps right across the Indo-Gangetic Plain.
Right. And Banda's geography makes it vulnerable.
Extremely vulnerable. Because Banda is located deep in the continental interior, it is completely cut off from any cooling maritime breezes from the ocean, so it takes the full, unmitigated impact of the Lu.
But, I mean, the Lu has always existed. It's a historical weather pattern. What makes this unprecedented 5-degree anomaly happen right now?
The anomaly is largely man-made. It's driven by severe ecological degradation.
Talk to me about the deforestation.
Bundelkhand has suffered decades of catastrophic deforestation. And we have to remember, trees don't just provide shade. They actively cool the surrounding air through a process called transpiration.
Transpiration, where they release moisture into the atmosphere.
Exactly. When you strip the land of its forest cover, the bare, rocky soil absorbs and radiates solar heat exponentially faster.
And it completely breaks the local water cycle.
It does.
The reports in the briefs highlight the severe depletion of groundwater tables in the area. And when the soil has no moisture left, you lose all evaporative cooling.
It's essentially like running a car engine with absolutely no coolant in the radiator.
Exactly. The heat just has nowhere to go.
And compounding all of this is the systemic destruction of the Ken River.
Which is a vital lifeline for that entire region.
It is. But rampant, heavy sand mining has completely decimated the riverbanks. It has destroyed the river's capacity to hold water and stabilize the local microclimate.
So you combine a dying river, totally depleted groundwater, and massive deforestation.
The land loses all natural thermal defense.
And then on top of all that, we build concrete cities right over it.
Exactly. Banda Town has experienced rapid, poorly planned urbanization. Concrete and asphalt absorb immense amounts of thermal energy during the day.
Which creates the classic urban heat island effect.
Right. It pushes localized city temperatures 2 to 3 degrees higher than the surrounding barren farmland.
Which leads to the most dangerous aspect of this entire crisis. The warm night syndrome.
This is where it gets deadly. Physiologically, the human body can survive extreme daytime heat if it has a chance to recover at night.
If the temperature drops.
Yes, but because the concrete infrastructure and the desiccated landscape have absorbed so much energy, they radiate that heat incredibly slowly after sunset.
So it stays hot all night.
Nighttime temperatures in Banda are failing to drop below 30 degrees Celsius.
Oh, wow.
The body never stops sweating. The cardiovascular system never gets to rest. The cumulative heat stress builds up day after day, rapidly accelerating the onset of heat stroke.
And the cascading impacts across the region are just devastating. I mean, you have immense stress on the electrical grid, leading to rolling blackouts precisely when people desperately need cooling.
Right.
You have massive cattle mortality. The agricultural cycle is completely paralyzed because the soil is literally too baked to begin preparing for the Kharif sowing season.
It's a multi-risk zone.
And tragically, we are bracing for the human toll. In 2024, the baseline was over 300 confirmed heat stroke deaths nationally, which experts widely agreed was an undercount.
Yes.
3 consecutive days of 48.2 degrees pushes us straight into mass casualty territory.
It does. And from a policy perspective, the immediate triage relies on heat action plans, or HAPs.
Coordinated by the IMD, the India Meteorological Department.
Right. These plans dictate early warning systems, adjusting school and labor hours, and mobilizing local health infrastructure.
But ADPs are just Band-Aids.
Exactly. The long-term interventions require the exact kind of durable infrastructure the new VBG-RAMG Act is supposed to fund.
We're talking about aggressive, massive afforestation.
Yes. Banning and actually enforcing the ban on sand mining in the Ken River.
Reviving traditional water catchment systems like step wells.
And on a massive scale, the government is betting heavily on the Ken-Betwa River linking project.
Ah, right. Designed to manually divert water into this perpetually parched region.
We are also looking at a forced evolution in agriculture here. The region simply can no longer support water-intensive crops like wheat or sugarcane.
They have to transition entirely to dryland farming, right? Climate-resilient millets and pulses.
It is a brutal reality check. The climate is dictating the absolute physical limits of where and how humans can survive.
The environment is imposing a strict boundary on the human body. But, you know, what is incredibly poetic and deeply fascinating is that while the human body struggles against limits in Uttar Pradesh—
A few hundred miles away.
Exactly. A few hundred miles away in Sharkhand, a human body just shattered a physical boundary that stood for decades.
It is a brilliant juxtaposition. We are moving from the macro tragedy of the climate to the absolute micro-perfection of human biomechanics.
At the Birsa Munda Athletics Stadium in Ranchi, at the National Senior Athletics Federation competition, we witnessed a true watershed moment in Indian sports history.
We are talking about Gurinder Singh.
Yes, a 25-year-old petty officer in the Indian Navy who stepped onto the track and ran the 100-meter dash in an astonishing 10.09 seconds.
10.09. He obliterated the previous national record of 10.18.
He is the first Indian male in history to break the mythological 10.0-second barrier.
And the competitive crucible that produced this record was phenomenal. I mean, it wasn't just a solitary achievement.
No, the rivalry was incredible. Take us through how this played out over the days.
So, Gurinder initially broke the record in his semifinal, running a 10.16.
Which was already huge.
Huge. But immediately after, in the very next heat, a 22-year-old phenom named Animesh Kujur ran a 10.15.
Just snatching the record right back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It forced an ultimate showdown in the final. And there, Gurinder found another gear entirely to clock that 10.09.
With Animesh right behind him at 10.20. It's the exact kind of rivalry that pushes athletes to absolute greatness.
It really is.
But, looking at these times, 10.18 down to 10.09 to the naked eye, the difference is literally less than the blink of an eye. They both just look like a total blur.
True.
So let's break down the actual physics of this. What separates a very fast human from a historically fast human over 100 meters?
We have to analyze the race in distinct biomechanical phases, and it actually starts before they even take a step.
Really? Before the step?
Yes. It begins with reaction time. This is the delay between the starter's pistol and the athlete applying force to the starting blocks. Human neurology has a hard limit. If you react in less than 0.1/0 seconds, it's considered a false start, because science says your brain physically cannot process the sound of the gun that fast.
Right. So what do elite sprinters average?
They average around 0.145 seconds. Gurinder reacted in 0.134 seconds.
Wow.
He essentially bought himself 1/100th of a second of pure advantage through sheer neurological efficiency.
And then comes the explosion out of the blocks. The drive phase.
Right. The drive phase covers the first 30 meters. Now, this isn't about top speed yet. It's entirely about acceleration mechanics.
How so?
Gurinder executed a flawless forward lean. He kept his center of gravity incredibly low while generating massive horizontal force with a high knee drive.
He achieved a higher rate of acceleration than anyone else in the field.
Exactly, which transitions into the maximum velocity phase. Around 50 to 80 meters, everyone hits their absolute top speed. And here, physics just takes over.
Speed is simply stride length multiplied by stride frequency.
Exactly, and Gurinder's mechanics here were exceptional. His stride length at maximum velocity was estimated at 2.15 meters.
2.15 meters per step.
Think about that. When you are covering 2.15 meters per step, and you maintain the rapid turnover rate of your competitors who might only be covering 2 meters per step, you invariably pull away from the pack.
It's just math at that point. But, the cruelest part of the 100-meter dash is actually the final 20 meters.
Yes.
Because nobody is actually speeding up at the end of a 100-meter sprint.
No, they aren't. Human physiology relies on the ATP-PC energy system for explosive movement, and that system literally burns out after about 7 seconds.
So the final 20 meters is just survival.
It is the deceleration phase. Lactic acid floods the muscles, oxygen debt peaks, and the hamstrings literally begin to lock up.
So the winner of a 100-meter dash is very rarely the person with the highest top speed. Is almost always the person who decelerates the least.
Precisely. And Gurinder's core strength and conditioning allowed him to maintain his structural form. He didn't tighten up, he didn't throw his shoulders back, he rode the deceleration perfectly right through the finish line.
And crucially, he did all of this without the help of the wind.
This is a very important point.
Because track rules stipulate that a record only counts if the tailwind is under positive 2.0 meters per second.
Right.
Gurinder ran this 10.09 with a practically negligible tailwind of just positive 0.1 meters per second. He essentially ran through still air.
Which makes the time even more impressive. Now, we do need to contextualize this on the global stage.
Right.
The world record is, of course, Usain Bolt's 9.58 seconds. A half-second gap in sprinting is an absolute chasm.
It's huge.
However, a 10.09 is not just an Indian milestone. It is the second fastest time recorded by an Asian male in the entire 2026 season.
That's incredible. It automatically qualifies him for the 2026 Commonwealth Games.
It proves that elite Indian sprinting has officially arrived.
And it proves that the ecosystem building these athletes is finally functioning. We often talk about India's massive population, not yielding Olympic medals historically.
Right, the old cliche.
But Gurinder's success is the result of a very specific, deliberate convergence of public policy and private capital.
It is a dual-engine model. First, you have the foundational stability provided by the state, specifically the defense sports quotas.
Okay, tell me about that.
The Indian Armed Forces, in this case the Navy, provide athletes with secure employment, discipline, and basic infrastructural support. They don't have to worry about paying rent or their next meal. They can focus entirely on training.
And then private capital comes in to provide that elite world-class edge.
Exactly. Gurinder Veer trains at the Reliance Foundation High Performance Center.
Utilizing cutting-edge sports science.
Right. Biomechanical analysis, optimal nutrition, and a top-tier foreign coach in James Hiller.
And acting as the umbrella over this entire operation is the government's TOPS initiative.
The Target Olympic Podium Scheme.
Yes.
TOPS identifies these elite prospects and injects highly targeted funding. It pays for international exposure, specialized equipment.
So when you synthesize the institutional support of the Navy, the high-performance capital of Reliance, and the targeted funding of TOPS, you manufacture a 10.09-second sprinter.
You do.
And we should quickly mention that this exact ecosystem produced another historic moment at the exact same meet. Tejaswin Shankar became the first Indian to break the 8,000-point barrier in the decathlon, scoring 8,057 points.
The human capital in India is truly being optimized.
It is a perfect example of institutional cooperation yielding unprecedented results. But, as we look at how private investment and labor are cooperating to push boundaries in India, we really have to turn our attention to how private labor forces are aggressively asserting their own power in other parts of the world.
Yes, reshaping the global economic boundaries.
Let's fly from the track in Ranchi to the corporate boardrooms of Seoul, South Korea, because we are looking at a landmark event at Samsung Electronics.
A truly historic deal.
In May 2026, Samsung, which is the crown jewel of the South Korean economy, the world's largest manufacturer of memory chips and smartphones, they agreed to a historic wage deal with their union.
They secured a 5.1% wage increase, retroactive to 2024.
Alongside vastly improved working conditions and guaranteed union consultation rights.
Now, a 5% raise might not sound like front-page global news to everyone.
Right, it sounds pretty standard.
But in the context of South Korean corporate history, this is a seismic, paradigm-shifting event. To understand why, you really have to understand the culture of the chaebol.
The chaebol, what exactly is that?
A chaebol is essentially a massive family-controlled industrial conglomerate. Companies like Samsung, Hyundai, LG.
Okay.
These entities don't just participate in the South Korean economy, they completely dominate it. They account for an overwhelming majority of the national GDP.
And the historical posture of these chaebols toward organized labor. It's been pretty aggressively hostile, right?
Particularly Samsung. For 55 years, since its founding by Lee Byung-chul, Samsung operated under a strict, unyielding, no-union philosophy.
55 years.
Yes. Management promoted this paternalistic view that the company would take care of its family of workers far better than any external union could.
But in reality,
they deployed immense pressure, surveillance, and internal tactics to crush any attempt at independent collective bargaining. They only allowed these defanged, management-friendly house unions to exist.
So what broke? I mean, how did a 55-year anti-union wall suddenly collapse in 2026?
It collapsed because of the sheer persistence and eventual critical mass achieved by the National Samsung Electronics Union, the NSEU.
They just kept organizing.
They steadily organized until they actually had the numbers to disrupt production.
Yeah.
And in July 2024, they did the unthinkable. They launched a 3-day strike.
The first major strike in Samsung's history.
It was. It shattered that paternalistic myth entirely. It proved to management that the workforce was actually willing to inflict financial pain.
And that strike, and the lingering threat of further disruptions, eventually forced Samsung's leadership to the negotiating table, culminating in this May 2026 deal.
It is a massive victory for labor rights, a market-driven reform that decades of government regulation failed to achieve.
It's an incredible story. But let's bring this back to our listener.
Sure.
Why should someone tracking geopolitics or the Indian economy care about collective bargaining in Seoul? Like, how does a 5% wage hike in Korea actually affect us?
Because we live in a hyper-connected global supply chain, and Samsung sits at the very foundation of that chain.
Okay, lay it out for us.
When a heavily unionized, empowered labor force drives up manufacturing costs in South Korea, it squeezes Samsung's profit margins on everything, from standard semiconductors to EV batteries.
And to protect those margins, Samsung has to adapt.
Exactly.
But adaptation in corporate terms usually means two things, right? Replacing humans with robots or finding cheaper humans somewhere else.
Precisely. It accelerates internal automation, absolutely. But more importantly for India, it acts as a massive catalyst for geographic diversification.
They need to move factories.
Samsung is heavily incentivized to shift more of its intensive manufacturing capacity out of the expensive, unionized Korean market and into emerging markets with cheaper labor and aggressive industrial subsidies.
And India is obviously making massive plays to capture this exact migration, particularly in the semiconductor packaging space.
Absolutely.
But there's also a massive competitive vulnerability that forced Samsung's hand here, specifically involving artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
They couldn't afford a protracted labor war because they're currently losing a technological war.
Yes. This is the crucial context. The entire tech world right now revolves around AI.
Yep.
And AI servers require a very specific, ultra-advanced type of memory chip called high bandwidth memory, or HBM.
High bandwidth memory, got it.
Right now, Samsung's bitter domestic rival, SK Hynix, is completely dominating the HBM market. They are the primary supplier for NVIDIA.
So Samsung is falling behind.
They are desperately trying to catch up and qualify their own HBM chips for NVIDIA's hardware. In the middle of an existential technological race like that, a labor strike shutting down your fabrication plants, it is a death sentence.
So Samsung's management essentially surrendered to the union's demands because internal operational peace was just an absolute non-negotiable necessity.
They had to have peace to compete in the AI boom.
Which perfectly sets up our final and arguably most consequential topic of the day.
It really does.
We've talked about the memory chips that go into the AI servers. Now we have to talk about the company that essentially owns the entire artificial intelligence revolution.
We have to talk about NVIDIA.
Yes, NVIDIA. And a financial commitment that is so unimaginably large, it fundamentally alters global geopolitics.
The scale of this announcement is genuinely difficult to comprehend.
It is. In late May 2026, NVIDIA's CEO, Jensen Huang, stood in Taipei and announced that NVIDIA will spend $150 billion annually in Taiwan for semiconductor procurement.
$150 billion every single year.
Just to put that in perspective for you listening, that annual procurement budget is larger than the entire GDP of many sovereign nations.
It's massive.
NVIDIA has reached a market capitalization of roughly $3.5 trillion. Their data center revenue alone just passed $100 billion. They are the undisputed apex predator of the global tech economy.
They are.
And they are taking their entire fortune and anchoring it to one tiny island, specifically to one company, TSMC.
The Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company.
Why? Why does NVIDIA have no choice but to spend this money in Taiwan?
To understand that, you have to understand the foundry model of the semiconductor industry.
Okay, explain the foundry model.
NVIDIA is what we call a fabless company. They are brilliant architects. They design the intricate, unimaginably complex circuitry of chips, like their new Blackwell GB200 series.
Right, they draw the blueprints.
Exactly. But they do not own a single factory. They don't physically print the chips themselves. They outsource all of that extremely difficult manufacturing to a foundry.
And TSMC isn't just any foundry. They are practically a monopoly at the absolute bleeding edge of physics.
They are. TSMC manufactures over 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors. We're talking chips built on 5-nanometer and 3-nanometer nodes.
90%.
Yes. Apple, AMD, Qualcomm, and NVIDIA. They are all entirely dependent on TSMC's manufacturing supremacy. The precision required to print billions of transistors onto a sliver of silicon is so astronomically high that nobody else on Earth can currently match TSMC's yield rates at that scale.
So from a purely economic standpoint, NVIDIA is just paying their supplier. It's a massive bill, but it's just business.
On the surface, yes.
But you don't announce a $150 billion annual spend in Taipei, flanked by the Taiwanese tech establishment, without fully understanding the geopolitical shockwave you are sending to Beijing and Washington.
Oh, absolutely not.
I mean, this is the ultimate manifestation of the Silicon Shield doctrine, isn't it?
It absolutely is the Silicon Shield in action. By concentrating the most critical, irreplaceable component of the global AI economy on the island of Taiwan, NVIDIA is fundamentally altering the calculus of war.
They are erecting a massive economic deterrent.
Exactly. This $150 billion commitment signals to the world that if a military conflict breaks out across the Taiwan Strait and TSMC goes offline, the global technological revolution halts immediately.
It would trigger an economic depression of unimaginable proportions.
It forces the United States and its allies to view the defense of Taiwan not just as a matter of democratic solidarity. It makes it an absolute prerequisite for their own economic survival.
And NVIDIA's maneuverability here is also heavily constrained by the United States government.
Yes, we have to factor in the Bureau of Industry and Security, the BIS.
Right. They have deployed export controls as a primary weapon in the U.S.-China tech war.
The BIS export controls severely restrict NVIDIA's ability to sell its most advanced AI accelerators, like the H100 or the new Blackwell chips, to Chinese entities.
Because the objective is to throttle China's ability to develop advanced military AI.
Exactly. Because NVIDIA is essentially locked out of the massive Chinese market for its top-tier products, they have been forced to double down on procurement and sales within the allied ecosystem.
Meaning Taiwan, Japan, Europe, and the U.S.
Right.
Though, the political winds could shift that. The briefs note the recent summit between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping.
Yes, the diplomatic channels are always moving.
If a broader geopolitical bargain is struck and those export controls are relaxed, NVIDIA's calculus and their reliance on this specific geopolitical alignment could pivot overnight.
It's a very fragile balance.
It is. But bringing this monumental global chess game back home, where does this leave India?
That is the million-dollar question for UPSC aspirants.
We have grand ambitions for Pax Silica. We want to be a semiconductor superpower. But when you see a $150 billion river of capital flowing straight into Taiwan, it puts our position into stark perspective.
It demands a very sober reality check.
What's the reality?
India is making highly strategic, necessary moves. Tata Electronics is building the nation's first major commercial fab in Dhalara.
Which is huge.
It is. And global giants like Micron are setting up ATMP and OSAT facilities.
Remind us what those acronyms mean.
Those are the plants that assemble, test, and package the chips after they are printed. And Reliance has signed MOUs with NVIDIA to build localized AI data centers.
So we are building the ecosystem.
We are. This is all vital groundwork.
But assembly is very different from atomic-level fabrication.
Precisely. The $150 billion NVIDIA is spending is to secure the bleeding-edge 3-nanometer fabrication that drives global AI. That capability is going to remain entirely locked inside Taiwan at TSMC for the foreseeable future.
India is successfully entering the broader semiconductor supply chain. But breaking into that ultra-advanced fabrication monopoly is a multi-decade, multi-trillion-dollar endeavor.
NVIDIA's announcement just illustrates how incredibly steep that mountain is for Pax Silica.
It is a phenomenal web of capital, physics, and hard geopolitical power. And it really brings us full circle on today's deep dive.
We have covered a lot of ground today.
We really have. We have unpacked a massive amount of incredibly dense information from the May 28, 2026 briefings.
And if we synthesize everything we've explored today, a very clear narrative emerges about the pursuit of control in an increasingly volatile world.
Yeah. You see the Indian state aggressively asserting control over its democratic borders with the Election Commission's RR.
Right. And seizing control of illicit capital through the expanded enforcement directorate.
You see the center attempting to control its fiscal destiny by shifting the burden of rural welfare onto the states with the VBG-RAMG Act.
And simultaneously, you see humanity colliding with the absolute limits of control. The environment in Banda is dictating its own brutal terms through a 48.2-degree heat wave, defying local interventions entirely.
Yet, on the track in Ranchi, Gurneevar Singh proved the human potential can still be pushed further, conquering the physical limits of speed.
And globally, massive corporate entities like Samsung's labor unions and NVIDIA's executive board are literally redrawing the economic maps that nation-states rely on.
It is a world where every boundary, legal, physical, and economic, is being actively contested and renegotiated.
That's the defining theme of this era.
And that leads to a final provocative thought to leave you with.
I'm ready.
If the last 20 years of global history were defined by globalization, a relentless, frictionless race to find the absolute cheapest labor and the cheapest resources anywhere on Earth.
Right. The race to the bottom for costs.
Is that era definitively over? Are we entering a new epoch defined by a desperate search for resilience?
Resilience instead of just efficiency.
Exactly. When NVIDIA locks in a $150 billion security premium in Taiwan, when the Indian government shifts welfare to mandate climate-resilient infrastructure, and when extreme heat dictates where we can physically survive, it seems we are now willing to pay any price for stability.
We are paying the premium for resilience.
The question we have to ask is, What happens to the populations, the states, and the nations that simply cannot afford to pay the premium for that resilience?
It's a profound question.
Keep questioning the narratives, keep looking for where the boundaries are shifting, and keep connecting the dots. We'll get you on the next deep dive.